Hi, it's John, and I'm here with Aideen Connolly.
Hello, John.
And where is here? Here is the Glenade Valley. Where are you, Aideen? There. Okay, and we're doing the Heritage Council project, and we're recording this video for Heritage Week. And where are we exactly? What county?
We're in County Leitrim.
Okay.
Lovely
And we met
Leitrim.
before. Were we across in SLIGO?
We were over in Keelogues. We did a survey there
Okay.
a few years ago
Okay.
on Keelogues and Ballintrellick.
What's this graveyard called?
This is Conwal in the Glenade Valley.
So this here, above, that valley there takes us down into Manor Hamilton.
It would past Glenade Lake and on into Manor Hamilton.
And behind us, it takes the village of
Kinloch, and then brings you right down to the little bit of coastline that Leitrim has.
So Leitrim actually isn't landlocked?
No, absolutely not. It's
Okay.
a beautiful stretch of coastline and great for surfers and
Okay.
lovely
What's that
place to visit.
called?
Tullahan
Tullahan.
is a little village
Okay.
that's on it. A great amount of heritage
We
in
have
that
some
area.
people here buried here who are
Absolutely,
down in Tullahan.
definitely, from Tullahan right up to Manor Hamilton and from further afield than that as well. So
Okay. So look, we'll walk in and we're going to look at one particular stone. Conwal graveyard. It's very unusual. It's got a lot of modern usage. It's got a lot of modern headstones on it. But in the same vein, its collection of old headstones is very, very interesting. And in particular, this one that we're walking up to now. It's a recumbent slab. It was buried for a while. It got buried, and that's it here. So it's sandstone. It's got a border frame on it, and at the top it has an animal that looks like it's being hunted, and the animal is a local mythological creature called the Dobhar Cú.
yes, it has considered sort of an otter-like creature, but I've also heard people describing it as a water wolf. So different parts of, but everybody around would have been brought up by their grannies telling them stories to be good because of the Dobhar Cú. So
Okay.
it's well known in the area, but each place has its own description of the creature. But definitely it came from the water, and it was something to be worried about.
And there's a story on the stone that apparently a young woman was murdered by the monster by the lakeside of Glenade Lake, is it?
Glenade Lake,
Over off that direction.
Yes.
Yeah, to our south.
She was Grace Connolly, and she married a Terence McLaughlin, and he went down to the lake one day because she was washing at the lake and hadn't returned home, and when he went down there was a creature lying on her and it had obviously killed her, and he killed it, and as it was dying it let a screech out of it, and from the lake came the creature's partner and chased him and his brother all the way along this valley and across around the mountain behind us here, right over at the base of it, and right to Ben Bulben in County Sligo.
Okay.
And in Cashel-Gowan in County Sligo, near where Henry's pub, if anybody knows where that is, it's on the main N15. There is that is where they're meant to have killed him by holding a spear between the gap, and the animal got pierced on the.
So it's. I remember when we were in Keelogues, you had a local story there, and it felt ancient to me.
Yeah.
And this too now, even though the headstone, which we're going to look at in more detail, it's 18th century, but the story sounds like it's connected with a monster from the lake, going back a long, long time.
I would agree with you, because for him to have got away with the story that that a creature killed his wife, but for him to be believed, if you turned up without a backstory there beforehand, nobody would believe you that a creature had killed your wife.
So here
there must have been an older story that was there for generations that made it plausible and believable that would have happened. So I think you're right when you say that.
So when I look at this then with my archaeologist hat on, we can see that the stone is actually partially damaged, because when it was buried and dug up, that we've lost part of the stone, and in fact a scalp came out of it there. But what you can see, and you've caught it very well in your drawing, is you can see that there's the tail of a hound, or the Dobhar Cú, and his hind leg, his head is turned back, and then there's a spear of some form piercing the back of his neck and down through his belly, and that's all there at the top of the stone. And just note here, there's a lovely border or a frame there, and then there's a full inscription that we're used to seeing. Now, when I went reading this first, and it's very hard to read, we got out the curtain and we were under it with the light, and we just weren't seeing a lot. But it was recorded 100 odd years ago, and you've gone using the rubbing technique, and you've got you're an artist.
Well, I do a little bit,
You do
and
art, yeah.
yes, I am an artist, and I use a lot of charcoal myself, and I thought, well, if we take it out and see if we can do it, do a rubbing with it.
So on newsprint.
On newsprint,
Yeah.
and then I do a lot with natural pigments as well. So I used dandelion leaves. I found give a nice juice on it, and
You mulched them up and
mulched them up
ran it over
and
the
ran it
paper.
over. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
and we have one here behind us.
mhm.
Now, I saw you doing it earlier, and I really liked it because it was mixing kind of natural elements, but it was bringing out things that we couldn't see,
Yeah,
and it creates a little work of art, I think.
Mhm.
Like, so I couldn't see anything at all up here, but it actually is showing the technique that there are descending letters in the first line, and then the second line we have our standard phraseology of body of, and then very clearly you've got Grace, and then Con for Connolly. The Connolly ends here, and then wife is here, and then from there on down it's actually relatively easy to read.
Yeah.
And we might go
It's-
back over and look at the stone to
Yeah.
see, because it's a Terence. Ye have a local name here, Terence or Trail Cosquelga, is it?
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's quite very popular still. Terry or
Are they?
Terence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very popular still. So, with,
And here, here's the TER for Terence. There's this chap uses 3 dots to show
you can
at
see
the end in
quite
a
well
word.
Here, they're quite. You can see them
There. Yeah.
between each word.
And then it's Muck, and then it's Lachlan, who died, and then it's Sevenber. Now that took us a little while to work out, but that's September. So in the old calendar that made it September. Do you know what that brings us? And then the final year is 1722. So Sevenber, September was the 7th month in the old calendar. That changed around about 1756.
Okay.
So that supports this being 1720s. We have our doubts exactly about the date. See, part of the solution, part of the question here is that actually part of the story about the Dobhar-chú, or has the Dobhar-chú legend been attached to the headstone afterwards? So if it's not a depiction of the Dobhar-chú, it could be a family coat of arms, or some kind of family, a story relating to a family crest and that kind of carry on. So my feeling is to understand the Dobhar-chú better, and then to conserve it as well, thanks to the Heritage Council, we should look at the other stones of similar date and with similar kind of marking. So I think we got over 300 stones, is it?
Yes, approximately that. Although we're finding more all the time as we search in the grave.
Leaning against the stone or a wall,
You
yeah.
might think it's a stone that has nothing on it, but the rubbing seems to be bringing up some additional information.
So this one here is interesting because it has a figurative carving at the top that looks like a coat of arms. There's some kind of an animal standing. There's an arm up here holding on to some kind of a spear or a sword, which is similar to the Dobhar-chú in a sense, you know. So, you know, I think I've said it before, archaeologists are trained to be skeptical, and in a structured manner, and then to try and tease apart what's happening and what might be happening and what the meaning is. And to do that, we need to look at all of the stones that have animals on them, and that might have arms and things like that. And that's one. So who do we get there? They were Clancy's, were they?
They were Clancy's, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was Connor's. It was Connor. Yeah, the husband was Thomas Connor, and the wife was Bridget Connor, and she was alias Clancy. And this is a Clancy corner. And here on the left end we have a priest's grave, and it has a very definite coat of arms of some type up top. And it was the Reverend Charles Clancy, and it's from the 1790s. So it's 70 years after the Dobhar-chú. But they are here in this part of Leitrim. They are using some kind of a coat of arms on the headstones in the 18th century. So they're both interesting. I think did we see another Heritage Council video recently
on the Clancy's,
on the McClancy's of
and
Melville,
O'Rourke's, yeah, Loch Melville and Ross Clougher.
yeah,
On the Cranog.
which is just over the hill from us
It is.
here. So those Clancys who were part of the Gaelic Lordship in charge of, or who had kind of claims to this whole part of the valley, this is one of their remaining burying places here, you know. So the Gaelic Lordships didn't vanish in Ireland. They actually persisted in a lot of ways. So I thought that was interesting. This one over here then. Now, you're a Connolly.
I'm a Connolly.
And a bit of a Gallagher.
I am my grandmother's Gallagher, and this is my great uncle's grave. Is one of the ones beside this particular grave.
Okay.
They're related or not. This is when we did a little bit of research on this so far. Gallagher is the name on this particular stone.
Yeah, it's very hard to read, but what's interesting is it has the coat of arms effect on the top. There's a horse. On the outside then there's a hand wielding a dagger or a sword, but then it also has the religious symbols of the winged heads in the corners. And then as you come down here, it's very hard to read, but it is for the Gallagher family. Now what I loved about this, Aideen, is that it's a recumbent slab covering a grave, and the grave that it's covering was used for burial in the last 2 weeks.
Yes, absolutely.
So some poor gent is buried in there. You can see they made a little train tracks with the timbers there, and they slid the recumbent slab along that, and that'll slide back over again. In all the years I've been doing this, I've rarely seen a recumbent slab being moved. So you can tell there's local knowledge required to be able to do that carefully and gently, you know. And that these things are, even though they look big, heavy and unwieldy, they can be moved if you have the know-how. So I'm trying to remember, did we get 1790s on him, or it was 1800s?
We got,
it was maybe in 1810. Yeah, it's coming back to me now. It was around about, it's either 18 something or 1810. The 18 has a very strong S curve, so he's later than the Dobhar-chú, but again it's showing us that they're still doing their coat of arms and things like that.
And the cherubs are coming into that one as
and
well.
the cherubs then, yeah, so we're getting more into the religious,
Yeah.
the out and out coat of arms with the ones over there, you know, it's all about the family.
And then, on this one it has the lion, it has a
Okay,
horse,
a
it has a
lion.
bird, it has an eagle. So there's quite a lot of animals on this
Okay.
coat of arms.
Okay.
And the cherubs then, the
Okay.
winged cherubs. So
Yeah, so you see, there is a tradition here of these kind of figurative carvings. This one is in between. Like it's early, it's either 1763, 65 or 68. It's a nice plain recumbent slab, and it's one of your Connollys. Like,
it is actually.
would these be your Connollys?
No. I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's a very popular name around, but this is a Roger Connolly who departed this life June the 11th, 1768 maybe, or 63. We're not sure about that one, but the 1760 is definitely right.
But what's interesting is that even if it was carved in the 1770s, it doesn't have a coat of arms on the top. What it has is got the IHS with the cross attached. And is there a sunburst there, Aideen?
There is a sunburst
Yeah.
all the way around it. Yeah.
So that's more our normal kind of religious, and you can see there's the Dobhar-chú beyond it.
And
now,
it's also about a little bit smaller just than the older one.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the same shape and form as it, but the type
yeah,
and the carving is different on it. It's moved in its design.
Like for the Dobhar-chú there to be 1720s, that's quite credible considering what it's showing. The question is it actually showing a lady who was murdered by an animal from the lake? From Glenade Lake now,
Glenade
isn't it?
Lake,
Yeah.
Glenade Lake.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Siobhan was saying earlier that local knowledge is of the house that
we
they
know
used to
where
live
his
in.
house is, yes,
So-
where they lived, just on this end of Glenade Lake. Just the ruins of the house is still there.
Okay, so we'll add that to our map,
Mhm.
which is part of the project we're working on. Now, just wanted to come over this side, because even though there's a lot of curbed modern grave plots and new headstones, we do have early stones. This fella you showed me earlier, he is early, he's 17, yeah, or 65 down there at the bottom.
Yeah.
He's slightly offline with the other ones. I think what's happening here, it's bringing us down to this early group. And this is interesting because it helps us work out about the Dobhar-chú stone. Where is the Dobhar-chú stone? So it's over there. So 20 meters away. Yeah. And then we're down into this early group and they're slightly off. And what we have is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quite early stones. And this one in particular catches my eye. It's number 169, and it's Dennis Mulvey and his wife Maud, alias Runyon. And
Which is the spelling is kind of interesting because it's Runian, which is actually the modern equivalent of Rooney, R-O-O anyway.
Right, Rooney's.
Well, yeah, because a lot of people get stuck on their genealogy when they see that.
Okay.
But it actually is
A Rooney.
Rooney.
Okay.
So she was Maud Rooney, married to Dennis. Again, you were talking about the L and the V.
Yeah.
Is a V sometimes is a U, so it's Lvihily on the stone, but it could be a U. Could it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
And
haven't
the date on
tied
that
that down.
is 17th of March, 1760. Now, the date on this is bothering me because it's indisputable. This is a beautiful stone. It looks early. It's got some kind of a tree of life here alongside the IHS. Maybe it's got the sun and the stars and the moon up on top. There's a bit of an omega on the crossbar. It's deeply cut. It uses the same punctuations or punks that's used on the Dobhar-chú over, triple dots in between words. And then it also has a very similar frame, and it looks to me like it's on the same sandstone. So I would have hypothesized that this is the same date as the Dobhar-chú, but the date on this stone is indisputably 1760. So you can see there MDCCLX, and the L and the X are together. So we have 30 odd years or 40 years between the two stones, and I would have said crikey they're the same. So we don't have an answer for trying to understand the Dobhar-chú in the light of this one. In fact, we have another question, but that's always the way. But it's interesting. The other thing too, I think, is that if the Dobhar-chú is over there and this is a modern group here, what it's actually trying to tell us is where was the old church. So on the archaeology.ie it mentions that the old church might be over in that far corner over, and I can see why they're saying that, because there looks like a built wall there, and there's a bit of plasters and there's a bit of an opening and things like that. The problem is, in these old rural medieval graveyards, these early headstones are south of the church, and that would potentially then have the early church in here somewhere, or even potentially just beyond us here. But I suspect it's actually here where we're pointing instead. That would be the hypothesis that I would base on. We can't tell, are these in the original line of the headstones, or are those ones in the original line of headstones? We know that the local community know how to move these stones because we can see it in action here, so there might be a little bit of movement happening in those. But the early group, I think, is telling us that the medieval church was down here. So I would just love if that was a 1720s date on that, but it ain't. And we can't rule out that L. And it's written in stone.
I know.
Yeah.
So
Which means we can't absolutely believe it, but we can't ignore it either. And then there's this lovely pair here, and this is the second most. The sword, the horse has a bridle, a bit of and a mane, yeah, and a bit of the head is broken, but the four legs are there. The hoofs are more delicate than the legs, but the rider's leg is slightly shaved. And there's other things going on there. It's an absolute beaut. And when we read that, what did we get?
here lies the body of Hugh McAlone, I would say. We're not quite sure.
Yeah.
And we're assuming it says died the 16th of March 1729.
Okay.
So 1729.
1729. So the lettering is slightly different. It's carved in false relief, just like the Dobhar Cú, but it's not the same letters. And as we did the rubbings earlier, we were talking about the letters, and you were feeling slightly different edges and different inclination for the carver, and I thought that was very interesting.
I thought the typeface and the way the person's carved it, to me, does not look the same.
Yeah.
It's more coarse, I'd say. Yeah. And not as deep.
Yeah.
And there's no border around it like the other two we talked about previously.
Yeah.
The one with the tree of life.
And now I can see the 1729 there at the bottom, and they've actually left a great big bit of stone down the bottom. But then this fella on the right is equally interesting. So that's 1729. This one on the right has got two dates on it. Yeah, that one, the McGlones, number 155.
So here,
the top section here has a date on it of 1735, and then later on down below they've added on a 1778. So 2 generations of these McClones, a Francis and a Gilly or a Gilly. Okay,
it looks like.
That be a man?
Yeah, I would say so. The body of Gilly McGlone, who died the 16th of May, Anno Domini MDCCXXXXV, which is 1735.
Okay.
And then below it, there's a line drawn, so that was an older, you can see it's an older carving in much bigger letters, and then underneath it also the body of, and there's a space which I don't know, and it says Francis McGlone, who died, I'm not sure of the date, but it definitely says March 1778, and then age, but I can't read the age. So
do you know what, 27?
27, well done, you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it there now. So the light changes for us. So what's interesting here is for these two, we have a very martial aspect on this one. I can't say that's a coat of arms, but it's very much a rider armed. This one then on the right is IHS and a sunburst, so that's very ecclesiastical, you know, whereas this one is more akin. So is that a martial scene or is it a hunting scene? Is the Dobhar Cú the story of the animal being killed over at the gap, or is it also, or could it also be a hunting scene? And they're the kind of things that we need to tease out. The answer is here in the graveyard, I suspect, Aideen, but it's also in the other graveyards here about.
There are,
and you said there's another graveyard.
Well, looking at old documents that was written about the Dobhar Cú stone, it seems there was another Dobhar Cú stone at a graveyard up near the Mully. It's further up towards Glenade Lake, and it disappeared around about 1918. So I think that would need to be our next graveyard to look at, John.
Yeah.
To see.
So we have another part of this project where we're going to link out the headstones to the farmsteads along the Glenade Valley up to the hill behind us. It's a stunning hill. When I come to Leitrim and Sligo, it just, my jaw drops, because what a beautiful place. What's that behind us?
Aru.
And it's stunning. And for a Munster man like me now to see those kind of cliffs and things like that, it's just, it's fab. What a wonderful place. And here, when you walk in and you see all the modern headstones, that's telling us that this community is very much here, that they know who they are and that they've been here a long time, and that they're marshalling the old stones and putting in the new ones. I'd say most of the burials from now on will go in a little attached cemetery outside. So it's a living burial ground that has these intriguing, these fantastic questions posed to us about the folklore. How old is that story of the... I saw in one of the accounts they said it was like a mixture of an otter and a crocodile.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah. And then other accounts, we'll go back over and we'll finish on the Dobhar Cú. Other accounts of the of these lake monsters, they're found all over Ireland. So it's a national phenomenon. And even now, sure, I can think of Pookie. You know, we have done other graveyards. There's one Clapook down in County Kilkenny, and the Pooka comes out of a cave in the hill and he flies around the set date of the year, you know. And in your case, I think your monsters come out of the lakes. You probably have them in the caves as well. But we're back here now at the Dobhar Cú. There's a conservation element to this too. There's a conservation architect going to advise us on how to look after this. But you can see it's an intriguing headstone. And early too, I think, I think with our 7 burr, I think we are pushing back, because I was trying to allow, maybe they used an older frame and then carve new letters into it, but no, that's not working. I do think we're in the 1720s. So we're here in Conwal. The community survey is well started, and we'll get it finished in the next few weeks, and then we'll go out into the townlands and we'll track down the farmsteads and things like that.
Right. Can I ask you one question about headstones? How old, recording headstones like this, is it common to see them in this state with the relief writing on it or not?
So the question being, so there's two types of the two normal types of carving on the headstones for the inscriptions. There's an incised carving where it's carved into the face of the stone, the letter is carved in, and then there's also a carving in relief or false relief. And what you do is you carve out the shape around the letter rather than the actual letter itself. And that's what we're seeing here. I've asked stone cutters this, is it easier to incise or to do this false relief? And yeah, they're stone cutters and they're used to it. To my mind, I think this is maybe people with carpentry skills, that people would have been carving in timber and in wood an awful lot, and that they're now beginning to transfer from timber carving onto stone carving, and they're using the timber style. on the stones, and then that changes. So 1720s all the way up to 1780s. Like this one here, the Connolly one, that's more conventional. That's in size lettering, and not in false relief, even though it's still 18th century. By now, I think being a monumental sculptor is almost becoming a profession for that one. Whereas here, I think you're probably getting a general skilled labour or trade, maybe a carpenter, now applying their skills over onto wood. So it's an absolute beaut. But a question I'd have for the coat of arms people is that hand there, piercing the hound, like with a spear, and there's the point of the spear coming out. Like, is that related to a coat of arms, or is it actually a depiction of an event, of a historic event on a headstone? I just don't know. So we'd have to ask some specialists on that and get their opinions and things. I'm not gainsaying the Dobhar Cú story. I think it's very real, and I think it's very ancient, and there's no reason why it can't apply to this headstone. But by asking the questions, hopefully it'll teach us more about this whole place. Good. You're a natural.
Oh, I don't know.
You have a lovely calm voice. Okay.
But,
Now,
anyway, I'm not feeling it inside, but anyway.
No.
I said nothing wrong.
Oh yeah, I nearly put my foot in it twice.
Yeah.